always think of
like
like the angel-headed hipster thing from like Howell or Ginsberg or something
well,
like that.
but
Yeah.
before that, right? It's Broyard writing about these guys who are into jazz, these black guys who are into jazz, and like the sort of remove, right? Getting back to that first tension, like with like authenticity versus remove, right? Is like these people who know all of the beats about like the different generations of jazz from like the first to like swing to then bop and hard bop and bebop, like by the time you get to the late 40s, knowing all the intricacies of that and the sound, the sonic representation of like how all of those generations like what they mean in terms of each of those shifts in jazz versus like when you see these hipsters, these original hipsters, like appreciating the music. It's at one point Broyard in that essay writes about how these guys would like intentionally dance off the beat to be ironic, right? And this is in the 40s, right? Like they're like just kind of fucking with everybody to be like, I get this so much that I can like ironically dance off beat, like I can dance on like the off rhythm just to sort of like have fun with this because I know how to do it correctly. And that hasn't really changed in 80 years, I don't think.
Right. I mean, I don't know if this is what you're saying, but it's sort of like the idea of like, for me, like taking classes on queer history and culture and theory around film mostly in college and in grad school. There was a lot about that sort of idea of queer or hip as like subversion or of, sort of like counter to the mainstream in some way while being there right in front of you. And like, that seems like that I'm thinking about those like ironic hipsters that are literally like dancing, off the beat in that intentional way. Seems like that's a really like, I don't know, very like visceral example of that kind of idea.
Yeah, I think it is,
and that's why it's like separated from sexuality to me. It's like queer was always introduced to me as something like there's something more than like the sex act in what we're calling queer. There's something like in its relationship to capital, even. You know what I mean? Like there's something like there's a sort of subversive cultural position that we call queer.
Right. So I think this is what gets us to like the elephant in the room, and I think this is like one of those distinguishing things between like queer culture versus like hipster glomming on queer culture, and why it ultimately feels like a heterosexual act most of the time is the word irony.
Yeah.
I think that, and they kind of talked about this the last time we talked a few weeks back about divas and appreciation and distance and remove and all this stuff. I think when you're dealing with like queer subversion and tweaking with stuff, you have this range of emotions, right? You have sarcasm, you have camp, you have utter sincerity, right? Like you have devotion, you have this range of ways that you can take on a piece of art, right? Like flipping it, reinterpreting it, like gleefully, like if you've ever seen back in the day, Charles Pierce or Lip Synca or any of these sort of like original, sort of like ideas about lip syncing or just putting on sort of an act in front of an audience where you're just sort of taking a piece of culture and then warping it. There's so many modes of humor there. I think similar to how like Gen X was kind of stuck within the like within sarcasm, right? It's like the mode of expression, the mode of like transmission, the reflection of like capital around them at the time of like late millennial like sarcasm. Like I feel like the hipster is something where it is sort of bounded by the rules of irony, right? And so what makes them and what makes it ultimately just frustrating and I think ultimately straight is that it is always playing by like the same rules